Good afternoon and welcome everyone to the Brighteye Edtech Startup Festival 2024. We're on day two, session two, where we're excited to learn a lot about growth through the insider story of the Duolingo journey from 3 to 200 million. Huge thanks to Gina Gotthilf, former VP at Duolingo, for being here to share and join a conversation with our Brighteye principal, David Guérin. My name is Hege, and I'm head of community at Brighteye, where I spend my time working with our portfolio companies and the wider edtech ecosystem, including doing events like this. So thank you all for joining this afternoon. If you're new to Brighteye, we are the most active early-stage edtech-focused venture capital fund in Europe, with 150 million euros under management across two funds. We invest in seed and Series A stage companies that help people learn and grow across Europe. Before I hand over to Gina and David, a heads up that we will also be breaking into some smaller groups after the presentations and conversations. So please prepare to share some of your own questions, challenges, and experiences around growth before we go back together in this room to put some of those questions forward in a Q&A. But first, please welcome David and Gina. The word is yours.
Thank you, Hege. Thank you so much. Gina, great to have you join us. I'm David, and I'm part of the Brighteye investment team. I'm based in France. Pretty sure you're hearing the lovely French accent now. But today we're not here to talk about me or Brighteye. We're very, very lucky to have Gina join us. She's I'll let her introduce herself, obviously, but I just want to say that she's now joined the dark side by becoming a VC, but she has potentially some news there. But before that, she led growth at Duolingo from 3 million to 200 million users in 5 years, which is madness. So that's why I'm very excited. I feel lucky. Duolingo is one of the best consumer companies in the world, and it's clearly an inspiration for most edtech and consumer founders. So thank you so much, Gina. As a former CMO myself, I had to admit that I admire what you've accomplished at Duolingo, especially since I know that you didn't have any budget and that you were focusing on organic growth, which is the holy grail. So that's yeah, very, very grateful to have you today. Guys, we have a very simple agenda, and then I'll shut up, which is we're going to have a 15 minutes conversation with Gina. I have a few burning questions. Then she has a presentation that she'd like to share. We're going to do this conversation, the breakout sessions, as Hege said. And finally, we will get back together for a Q&A, okay? Please keep in mind that this is... if you guys have really like the desire, like, oh, I have a question, I can't help it, just raise your hand. It's all about chatting today. It's informal in some ways. So yeah, feel free to interrupt us and share your question, okay? So yeah, now it's enough. It's enough for me. Gina, welcome. Please tell us more about yourself. From Tumblr to working on Mike Bloomberg's presidential campaign, Duolingo, now VC, and perhaps a new venture. Yeah, tell us more about yourself, please.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, guys. I hope that this is useful to you. I'm Gina. I'm originally from Brazil, born and raised, and I've been living in the United States for 20 years. I have a very weird background in philosophy and some neuroscience, and then ended up getting hired by Tumblr to launch and grow Tumblr in Brazil, Chile, and Argentina, which was crazy and also like no budget, wild times. I have many funny stories from that. And ended up getting hired by Duolingo because they started a consulting company where I was like the only person basically helping, like it was a company of one, where I was like, hey, tech companies and tech startups, like if you're interested in launching Latin America, come talk to me. And basically the person who had been hired as head of marketing at Duolingo had worked with someone who had worked with me at Tumblr when they were at Flickr. And she said like, hey, you guys grew a bunch in Brazil and Chile and Argentina. What did you do? And they connected us. And that's how that started. And I ended up leading growth there over time from 3 to 200 million users. I think I get a lot more credit than I deserve, because it was a brilliant team and a brilliant product, and the retention was there for me to be able to apply growth. There was also some luck involved, but also just a lot of like really not being afraid to try crazy things and be wrong, and so I'll tell a little bit more about how Duolingo grew from 3 to 200 million users in the presentation. But happy to answer questions as well. And then I was part of the executive team there, so that was also huge for my growth and learning, because we raised rounds, we pivoted, and being part of those decisions was really amazing. When I left Duolingo, I ended up working on the Mike Bloomberg presidential campaign here in New York. It was very brief, but very intense. And there we had $1 million a day in budget. So very different marketing experience. From an A/B testing perspective, it was super fun because I got to do a lot of different A/B tests in one day and reach results with statistical significance, which was unheard of. Like at Duolingo, we had to wait 2 weeks to get to any results from our A/B test. So it was cool. And then I co-founded Latitude, which is a venture capital firm focused on early stage startups in Latin America. And we started also an event series for 4,000 people, and like an accelerator kind of thing. But basically just a way to bring together all of Latin America, connect the best of the best to each other, and help them have tools to be more likely to succeed at a faster pace. And then more recently, like Friday, I quit. I didn't fully quit. I mostly quit. And I'm going to start an edtech too. And I'm super nervous about it. So now I have joined you guys formally on the dark side again.
This is great. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm so curious, but we can take this all offline, obviously. But it's yeah, very, very exciting news for the whole ecosystem here. So look, let's focus for a few minutes on the early days at Duolingo. So I know you love A/B tests and A/B tests and experimentation and so on. And you started and you had no budget, as far as I understand, right? Or close to no budget.
No budget.
So okay, no budget.
My
Right.
salary, yeah.
Your salary, okay, fine. You could use your salary for paid advertising, essentially. But no, but more seriously, how did you manage? Like really, how did you manage to do that without any budget?
So well, I guess like and David, like I'll go over all of this, and then I feel bad if my presentation goes over the same stuff later.
Don't worry.
Okay.
So impressive that we can hear it twice. Don't worry.
Okay. So Duolingo had a lot of things going for it, right? I'll start there because I couldn't have made any product grow like that. It still was kind of like crappy looking, but it had very base like retention. It also was a product that was so inspiring. Like the mission to bring free language education to the world is so meaningful and resonates with a lot of people. And that's why I love EdTech, because there's so much of EdTech that isn't just like download this app and try this thing. It's like we are changing the world. And the team was brilliant, as I said. So when they asked me to launch and grow Duolingo, first at Brazil, Chile, Argentina, then they were like, can you do Mexico? Can you do France, Germany, Portugal, Japan, China, Korea, Russia, India? I thought, okay, how can I get the maximum amount of people to hear about Duolingo? Because that's what I had to do in the beginning, just like awareness. Like, how do I get them to hear about Duolingo and download the app for free? And PR ended up being the answer. I didn't know that it was PR at the time because I didn't know what PR was. I was 27, but I thought, hey, if I message journalists and bloggers and podcast people and all that, there was less podcasts at the time, but like if I'm able to convince people with large audiences that they should write about this, then I could reach a large number of people. And if I'm able to do this within a short period of time, I think I can create something that I call like a surround sound effect, where if someone hears about something multiple times, they think it's bigger than it really is. So if you're able to get like a lot of press at once, then people are like, they're like, like they see like, I don't know, like someone posts on social media about this thing called Duolingo. They don't pay attention. They go home and then their mom is like, I was at the hairdresser and I read about this thing in the magazine, and they're like, Duolingo, like, and then someone else says it and you think, wow, this is really big. Like I had never heard of it, and I guess I'm out of the loop. And then you go and you look it up. So it's kind of a fake it till you make it strategy, where you make make the thing seem bigger and more important than it already is, to convince people to actually download it and try it and make it big and important. And so, and I ended up, in retrospect, at the time, it was a lot of trial and error, but creating a little bit of a PR playbook for how we would go into new markets and convince journalists that they should write about this in a short period of time, over and over and over. And then there were other pieces of it too, like looking at SEO, but not in the way that you would think. I can answer questions about that too. A little bit of ASO, making friends with all of the App Store leaders who had the power to feature Duolingo, because I knew that, like, of course they were featuring the best apps, but people are people, and people feature things they remember of people they like. And so, like, figuring out how to, like, be top of mind for them, so when, you know, they would consider featuring us in a new country. And then figuring out what else got us press. So, like, government partnerships, even though it didn't help us grow, getting press about it helped us grow and helped us gain credibility for schools, which is what we needed. We tried a bunch of stuff that didn't work, like trying to, like, grow in schools through teachers. It worked very slowly. And then over time, I became head of growth on the product side. So then it was a lot of A/B testing, prioritization, etc., emails, notifications. So everything except for buying ads.
Wow. Okay. So no, but nothing, no paid ads at all.
No paid ads at all. Duolingo started doing paid ads around year 4, and I was still there. And we started it was just testing to learn, to, like, figure out, like, and we ended up building, like, basically our ads team in the early days was this guy Hideki Shima, who's a PhD in machine learning from Carnegie Mellon, and, like, he was there basically, like, building kind of like an algorithm that would help us, like, automatically use Facebook to understand how much we should bid per user based on how much we thought we could make for that user. So, like, a little bit like of an exchange, you know, almost like within Duolingo. So it's not a traditional paid marketing perspective. Yeah. And then over time, it kind of, you know, hit a point where it really had to start scaling that. And especially once, the thing about Duolingo ads is that we didn't want to charge anyone if we weren't making money from users, and Duolingo was free. So it makes no sense to have a CAC if you don't have an LTV. So by the time we had an LTV, then we started working with figuring out our CAC and growth.
That's smart. Thank you. And do you know, I know you're out of the loop, obviously, because you left the company, but do you know if, what's the split today between organic and paid?
No, I don't. I'm sorry. I don't.
Right. Yeah. I was just curious. I was like, hey, is it still, like, I don't know, 80 or 90% organic and only, a tiny piece paid or not?
If I had to guess, David, I would guess 70, maybe like 70-30, 70 organic, 30 paid, if I had to guess. Because it's just the mentality of the company. It was always like, we're not going to be like a marketing paid ads company. And if you look at Duolingo, like, the reason I highlighted the mission and all of this stuff is that when you have a lot behind the brand for storytelling, then it gives you a lot of opportunity also for growth that's exciting and organic. Like, just yesterday, someone sent me a video of what I think something Duolingo did yesterday here in New York City, because people keep sending it to me, where they had these, like, really hot men dressed up in only, like, shorts and a Duolingo hat, like mask, running around Soho. And they texted me and they said, this is really inefficient and stupid, like something like that. Like, and I'm like, no, it's kind of brilliant, because it's just like, it's funny, it's irreverent, it goes along with the brand, and the brand is evolving. It's becoming more funny, more irreverent. And, you know, some things just capture attention. And I think, and that's organic. They probably just had some guys from the office go, you know? So, like, that's a small thing, but I think I can't imagine, well, maybe over time, but, like, Duolingo really becoming a company that spends most of its time thinking about how to buy new users.
That's cool. Yeah, I heard you said that in Lenny's podcast about the brand and personality, voice, you know, like funny, interactions with users and so on. So yeah, it takes time, as you rightly said in this podcast. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's good not to take yourself too seriously. Let's put it this way. So
yes, I think that's the moral of the story for sure.
It is, but that's cool. We have a cool Alexander. Perhaps we can address this question. This is an interesting one in the chat. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it.
No, because I was talking and I'm bad at doing two things at the same time.
Fine. It's like, okay, so I'll read it. Considering how different the state of the economy is today compared to when Duolingo was going through this super impressive and inspiring growth journey, for example, how different the investors' VC appetite is today. are there any learnings from this journey that you'd say can apply even today and something that us startup could try adopt? Ooh,
There's a lot of questions in here, I feel like.
yeah. Focusing on organic. No, I'm kidding. But yeah. If you wanna, to think about it a few seconds, it's fine.
No, I'm gonna try to answer it in part. So, Alexander, I'm about to join the dark side again, and maybe I'm going to eat my own words, because now I've been like in Duolingo and then a campaign and then VC. So I work with startups very closely. And what I think is that objectively, not much has changed. I know that it sounds crazy, but I think so here's what actually has changed since then. Apps were a lot more of a novelty. There were less apps to compete with on the App Store. So things that you were able to do on the App Store probably had more, more chances of like making a splash. There were no successful ed techs really, and so that gave us room for growth, but it was actually, I think, harder for Duolingo because we had to convince people that like this was not just a stupid game and that people actually could have education on an app or in a format that isn't like in a traditional way. And I think that has changed and paved the way for edtechs, which is why now I'm going to start an edtech. It's kind of riding on the fact that like now that has been established. In terms of the economic landscape, look, we had like the crash of 2009, right? And then we had like a lesser of a crash over the last 2 years, arguably less severe than the one that we saw in 2009. So the way I see it, and I'm not an economist, but the economy goes through ebbs and flows, and it's just naturally like ups and downs. And that's if you take a step back and you look at it from a little bit farther away, like not just 1 year, but 10, but 20, then you start seeing that much like most lines, they start to flatten out a bit. Yeah. Of course, there's moments that you can take advantage of things, right? We had this zero interest rate period over the past few years where it's like everyone had free money, but that was like a little tiny moment in history that I don't know when it's going to happen again. But I think ultimately, like there is money to be invested in founders that people really believe in. Like, imagine like even if you have like $1,000 and you're only going to invest like 100, maybe you put $80 in like a fund, like the stock exchange or whatever, for $20. Like if you have a friend, it's your best friend, that he went to Princeton, he was #1 at Princeton, and then he was the head of product at Duolingo, I'm making this up. And then he decides to go build something because he realized through the Duolingo experience that this is the need and he knows exactly how to build it. You're going to invest because you're like, man, like the chances of this succeeding, I understand the problem. It's a huge problem. Like a lot of people need this solution for this. I think this is the person who's going to make the solution because of their experience. And so I think that there's still money for founders. It's just it's harder because you need to be able to prove that you are, first of all, the problem is a big problem, that there's a lot of people that suffer from this problem and there's money to be made because ultimately it's a business. And more importantly, that you are the person who's going to solve that problem. That's the hard part to prove. And I think that's exactly the same. Like you either prove it by having incredible experience that shows that you were able to do it before, or you are able to prove it because you hired incredible people or because you reached certain traction or whatever. You need proof points to get someone like David or like me up until Friday to say like, I think that if I invest in you, I'm going to make a lot of money, And so I don't think that has changed too much. I don't know if I answered your question fully, but that was the best I could.
That's great. Thank you. And Alex, feel free to unmute yourself if you want to comment or.
Thank you, Gina. And I totally understand. I agree also with parts of what you said. But what my question was about, I think, was more the differences in how I think Duolingo had a lot of access to VC funding. And I think that was a part of the growth journey as well. And now it's still sort of like a funding winter that people are talking about, and it feels like maybe more so in Europe than in the US. I'm not really sure about that, but and just considering those differences, what are your thoughts on this, and how can an early stage startup still make advances and be on a good growth journey, similar to Duolingo, but maybe not the same, of course.
Yes, thanks, Alex. So just to like qualify what I was saying, I think the first part I did answer, so I'll just rephrase it, which is, yes, Duolingo had access to a lot of VC funding because the founder of Duolingo had created the CAPTCHA and then reCAPTCHA and sold to companies to Google. So then people were like, here's my money. Like whatever you do, I think will work. That's why Duolingo had a lot of VC funding. And so again, like it doesn't change the fact that he still had to go and get a PhD and be a professor at Carnegie Mellon and sell 2 companies to Google and invent a technology that is still used today to have the credibility of the VCs at the time. It's still kind of crazy. So, you know, not to brag because I feel self-conscious about it, but like we were building this ed tech and my co-founder raised $12 million on a PowerPoint, which I think is outrageous from a VC perspective. Like who's giving us $12 million on a PowerPoint? Like we should have to prove ourselves. But like there are people who are willing to say, okay, you guys have done it here, so now you can do it there. So there's still VC funding. It's just less so. And you need to like really be one of like top to like really be able to secure that. Now, there are going to be a lot of amazing founders who don't have that. Like, for example, Mark Zuckerberg didn't have anything when he started Facebook, right? Like he didn't have like a track record, so to speak. He dropped out of college, no one expected. And there's going to be a lot of young people who don't have this track record and want to build something and are probably very well positioned to build technologies that are going to change the world, especially because like I don't understand Gen Z. I need to change that immediately, but like, you know, Gen Z understands Gen Z. And so then to answer the second part of your question is like, okay, but if you don't have VC funding, like it's nice to be able to do organic growth if you have money to pay people for a really long time and you can gain traction up until the point that you have hundreds of millions of users before you even start charging. That's a luxury. It's a luxury of a VC-backed company, 100%. If you don't have that luxury, you need to start charging for users. You need to start charging your users for something. And you need to get there as quickly as possible, which may get in the way of your growth. So you're going to have to manage that. So I'll give you an example of one company that I just invested in. It's an edtech also. It's called Be Confident. And they are like four boys. They're 23 and they grew up in a kind of a not a good part of São Paulo, Brazil. They didn't go to like a top university. So they didn't have any of those things, but they were 4 engineers. And they came to me and said, Gina, we're building a thing with AI to like help people practice English on WhatsApp. And I was like, that's really nice, guys. Like, I wish you the best, you know, like I want to be helpful, but like I you know, I have a lot of other things to do. So I'll answer your WhatsApp messages sometimes. They came back to me like 3 months later and said, Gina, like we got this many users. Like we started charging, people are paying this much. Still, I was like, that's great, guys. Like keep going, you know, whatever. About a year later, and I'm not proud of this, okay? Because from a VC perspective, I was just busy with my own stuff. I wasn't paying attention. A year later, they come to me and they're like, Gina, like we have hit $500,000 in ARR. And I was like, what? They're like, we bootstrapped it. I'm like, how? They're like, well, we started doing this thing on WhatsApp where like we did it groups of WhatsApp and then people started using this thing. And then on Fridays, they would join for like a conversation. And in order to have access to that, we started charging a subscription. And like, we don't think we can grow from WhatsApp because now we're on this different platform. We need to build an actual app, but we've proven the traction. We've proven that we can do it with a scrappy mindset. We are making enough money to pay everybody. So we're like not actually, you know, we're not burning money. We're not like, we're paying ourselves minimally. And as a VC, I'm like, oh my God, take all my money. Because if you're able to do that with nothing, you know, like what can you do with my money? And so it's a hard balance because there's going to be moments where you're going to turn on like charging and it's going to stagnate your growth. And then you want to like turn off the charging so that you can grow, you know, get your growth. Purely organic growth is only for those who were able to secure VC funding for a while. That's just the truth.
Thank you. Is it helpful, Alexander?
Sorry?
Is it helpful?
It is, but I mean, it's I would say also it's like maybe not like the like, you know, world new information as well. But I do really appreciate the input. I do, and try to have to navigate that also with my own startup. So let's see how that goes.
Got it. Look, I mean, there is no new information. The takeaway here is that you need to have proof points, right? Whatever. Of course, there are different types of proof points that you can show, but it's just you need to unless you're raising at pre-seed and it's just like, hey, this is the ID stage, essentially. But seed and Series A, and B even more so. It's really about showing that you have the equation that kind of works, not perfectly, but it kind of works. So if you put money here, it's gonna yield into X, right? So that will never change. I think this will still be true. That was true 20 years ago, and it will still be true 20 years from now. So it's so yeah. Anyway, to Gina's point.
And if you can't get VC funding, Alex, then try to convince at least friends and family who know you well. Like, you know, maybe some of your colleagues are like, you're brilliant. I want to give you my money because I know that you're awesome. Like, at least that, you know, so that you have enough to start building something.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Gina. Thank you, David. Thank you, Ega. I have to drop now for another meeting, but yeah, thanks again for your input. And
cheers. Thank you, Alexander. Cheers. Thanks for that. Look, it looks like we are already in the Q&A session here. So, Gina, do you mind if we just go through the 2 questions that we received in the chat before and then we can move to the deck? Is that all right? To the presentation?
Of course, yeah. I haven't read
Great.
it either, so let's go for it.
Okay, let's go for it. So, Jacob or Jakub, I don't know how you want to. You're from Norway, if I remember correctly. So I hope I'm not butchering your first name.
Yeah, no worries, no worries.
But do you want to ask your question? Perhaps it's even easier.
Yeah. So you just briefly mentioned, I think, that it was hard to go through teachers, I think, to increase the number of users. I'm just curious to hear about sort of your experience with that. And obviously, it's hard to convince them, but I think teachers or professors can sometimes have a lot of influence still. So, and then, yeah, just curious to hear your thoughts on that, Gina.
Love the question. Love the question.
Yeah. And here things have changed because like I do think that the education landscape has evolved, but I will also say that I think that schools and governments are very slow to change. Like they're just very established and people like the way that they are, and especially teachers. With all respect to teachers, like teachers have been trained to do things a certain way, and now they're in a position where like they do their job this way and they like were the top of their class and they're amazing, and now you're telling them like, no, you're supposed to do things differently. They don't like it so much. And well, I think some younger teachers are a lot more open to this, but older teachers are going to be less open to it, like as a generalization. And we had to convince teachers that we weren't trying to steal their jobs, you know, because I think a lot of teachers thought that Duolingo was trying to come in and take over the jobs of teachers and just take over the market, which maybe one day, but like it certainly wasn't, you know, the plan in the short to midterm. And then the flipped classroom model started getting discussed and etc. So yes, convincing teachers in schools is slow and hard. It's less slow and hard than it was before. What we did and what worked and what didn't work. I'll tell you what worked. Well, first of all, like schools want to know that something is like validated for them to actually use it on their students. They need to know that there's some sort of like validation behind it. The funny thing about validation is that it's very relative. Like who's validating what and like according to who. A lot of these things don't actually have very well-established guidelines. I know that this depends on the country and the type of education, but in general. So one of the things we did is for example, we partnered with the government of Colombia and Mexico. It sounds like a huge thing, but it wasn't. Like we were able to get a contact in Jalisco, which is like one place in Mexico, and get someone there who was really excited about the future of education to do something with us. And the agreement was they had to put Duolingo, the logo, on this landing page that was a .gov. Like that's what I wanted them to do. And then we were going to work with them and do things. The actual partnership like didn't really go anywhere. But then just being able to write to journalists and say, Duolingo, this new edtech, has a partnership with the government, like to do things that it gave like this era of like, wow, the government validates this as like an important, like you know, good tool. And then the journalists wrote about it, and then teachers would read about it and be like, oh, this tool is validated by the government. And so you start building credibility using institutions that already have credibility, so that teachers don't feel like they're taking a complete risk by gambling on you. So that's number one. Number two is we found this conference that was a language teachers conference in California, very niche. It was just language teachers in the United States. And we went and Luis gave a talk. And the talk was tailored to make teachers feel incredibly empowered by Duolingo, and like they could be part of this like incredible movement versus like, here's a tool you can use that can make things better for you. It was more about the future of education, what's possible, why your students deserve the best, and how, you know, it was an inspirational talk. Works much more, for example, than when you go to a conference and you try to buy a booth and you stand there in the booth and you try to convince people to check out your thing. You know, like the talk makes you an authority figure, and if played well, that could work out really well too. Things that we did that did not work. It could have almost worked, but like, for example, with the implementation of the government thing, we we actually had someone go to Colombia and to Mexico and to train teachers, and then we had teachers train teachers on how to use Duolingo. But then we look at the usage, and it was just so disparate between classes and students. Like some people were using it, some people weren't using it. So then we thought, okay, maybe we need like ambassadors. How do we empower teachers to become like ambassadors of Duolingo in some way and make them feel like they're part of something special? And how do we get them to champion Duolingo within the schools? When I was there, eventually we thought, you know what, let's just keep trying to convince children and parents that this is the way to go, because then children come to their teachers and say, can I please do Duolingo for homework? And after like 10 requests, maybe they'll be like, fine, do Duolingo for homework. And they start like getting used to the idea. Or if the parent is like, my kid is loving French because now they're doing Duolingo, the teacher is going to be very happy, you know? So you have to think about like the different entry points. Yeah, but it's really tough to convince educational institutions, but and I'm sure that there are others who have done it better than we did, to be honest.
Thanks.
Cool.
I like the point about validation. I think that's really universal, I think, within EdTech. Yeah, thanks.
Guys, one more question, and then we really want to give Gina the time to go through the presentation, I guess, because we still have like, what, 25 minutes to go. Maximilian, do you mind? Alex B, don't take it the wrong way, but I think Maximilian has a very interesting question on experimentation. And if you want to unmute yourself and ask Gina, because that's, yeah, I know that she loves A/B testing. So yeah, that's a good one.
Sure. And Gina, let me know if this sort of preempts your presentation, if you're going to touch upon that. But you mentioned earlier that you guys had this culture at Duolingo during this crazy growth phase where you were actually really encouraging experimentation and sort of accepting occasionally being wrong, right? And finding that out quickly and then taking your learnings from it. And I was wondering, given that you were VC funded at the time, and obviously you still had low budgets, but you still, of course, always want to be right on the first try intuitively, right? And I was wondering, how did you sort of balance this? So this pressure of showing results, but still internally encouraging to try out new things, maybe sometimes crazy things, and being wrong maybe on the first try and then doing it right.
Thanks, Maximilian. Yeah, look, to be honest, it wasn't just occasionally being wrong. We were wrong more than 50% of the time. And it's like very easy to lose motivation, when the team's like trying experiments and they're all failing. So like as the head of the growth team, that was definitely something I had to navigate. In this growth phase, when I started A/B testing, I think there's a couple of things that are important. First, that we had a growth team that was like its own little team. And we were able to do things. Like we were able to, like, it was a tiny team. It was me and an engineer at back end. Then it was me and a back end engineer and a half a designer. Then it was me and a back end engineer, one front end engineer, and a full designer, and that's like the kind of how we grew that team. And that meant that we could actually implement things by ourselves. Whereas when I went to a lot of conferences, a lot of growth leaders would be like, how are you guys convincing products to do your A/B test? And like that was, I felt bad for them because like we were just able to do it. And because we had permission from the company, and we were able to, we had segmented users into little buckets, and we were able to do experiments that didn't interfere with each other. So you have to have like the data established in order for you to be able to run stuff like this. And then what I'll say is that it's important to have like a consistent, first, like when you come up with A/B tests and what you want to try, like to prioritize them based on something that makes sense. So for us, it was like a lot of like, what do we thought our ROI of each experiment would be based on the return being like DAUs. How many DAUs do you think we can get from this experiment? And it's like a little bit of a guess, but you get better and better, So like our best experiments yielded, let's say, like, I don't know, 15%. And then our, we expected an average winning experiment will be 7% and whatever. So we'd come up with a number, like how many DAUs do you think we can win by this? And it helps you think through, because like when you're earlier in the funnel, like in the onboarding and activation and onboarding part of the experience, you have more users to affect because there's just more people at the top of the funnel. So you have to think about things like that. And then in terms of the investment, it's time invested. So like, how many days will it take for an engineer to do this? How many days will it take for a designer to do this and for like copywriting to do this or whatever? So we would like actually rank all of these and then have a really good way to explain to ourselves and to the team like why we are prioritizing things this way. So at least there's that. It's not just like we're trying things that seem cool and that we heard from our users or from our mom, The second thing is having a portfolio. So like now you launch experiments, you're launching them on a regular basis, probably like, I don't know, once every 2 weeks or something like that, so that you have multiple experiments running at a time, and you start getting really good at like, checking them and being like, okay, this one, what was the result and how did we learn from it? That's the other thing. Just because an experiment failed doesn't mean that it was a failure. Like if it failed and you were able to learn something meaningful, that's worth sharing. It gives the team motivation, and also like makes you know that you're moving forward. You're not just like throwing money in the trash and stuck with nothing. So an interesting thing that I learned is that like an experiment, for example, when it really failed, like when experiment actually hurt users, that was a win. Because if an experiment like hurts users, it means that you touched on a moment in their experience that really matters to them. And if you're able to manipulate it in other ways, you might able to actually see a positive change. Versus, and to me, a failure is an experiment that leads to no change. Like you were not able to affect the user in any way, and that was a waste of time, Wow. Yeah.
And Gina, would you celebrate failures? Like, hey, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, embrace it. It's all right. Key lessons, but would you actually celebrate them in some ways? No.
And here I'll be like a little bit more harsh. Like I think it's important to keep the team motivated, but it's also important to keep the team hungry and learning and like and focus on the ball. I think that to me, like I am a little bit averse to the culture of like celebrate effort, like that I think, has become more pervasive, and maybe that means I'm going to be a harsh mom. But I think like it's a balance between like, yes, we're learning, we're growing, that's awesome. But now let's do a post-mortem and understand what didn't work and what could have gotten better. What are the things that we learned and what are we going to apply moving forward? Great. Now let's look at the next experiment in our prioritization. Based on our learnings, do we want to change anything? So for example, if we had like 3 experiments in this particular screen that we thought were going to be super effective, and we've done 2 experiments now and they've had 0 results, do we want to deprioritize the 3rd one? So like you're learning, okay, now let's go again. But it's not just like you just celebrate the wins. I think you have to celebrate the learnings, but without like fanfare, more like this is serious work our team has done. This is what we have found, and this is how we are going to use it moving forward. And I think in a business environment, that should be celebrated from the point of view of like people respect you.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing, Gina. I think it's very, very applicable also, both in terms of org structure as well as a process. And yeah, very, very helpful. Thanks.
Cool. Maximilian, you know what to do at Career OS now. It's yeah, you have the...
We'll get right on it.
Fine. Gina, do you want to look, guys? I think because of time, we're not going to do the breakout sessions. I think it's all right. But is that all right, Gina, if we move to the presentation now?
Yes.
Yeah.
And feedback from the people who are here. Am I speaking too fast, or is it okay? Because I'm going to go very fast through the presentation so that we
nobody's complaining, so it's fine. Okay. And Alex B, we will probably have some time for you for your question on which is a bit more specific to Gina's background. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So
Go for it, Gina. Now. The floor is yours. Yeah.
And I've been in the middle of like quitting my company and starting a new company. So I will admit that this is a presentation I've made before, and I hope it like doesn't have anything that wasn't supposed to be for this group, but it should be mostly good. I'll go quickly through. Okay, so the way I structured it is basically like thinking about growth from like different parts, almost like different parts of the like more traditional marketing funnel in a way. Starting with discovery, which is the first part I talked about today, which is PR. So before thinking about PR, like the question is, how do people discover you exist? Like how do you get to the maximum number of people and get them to discover you exist in the most efficient way? And that's an important part of the growth puzzle. So with Tumblr, this example from Tumblr actually, like figuring out, like that's where I started this, figuring out how to get like this is a top magazine in Brazil, how to get them to write something about Tumblr that isn't like top sites that you can go to when you want to procrastinate, like that kind of story will not actually get you traffic. Or like Tumblr raised $20 million in their next round, also doesn't get traffic. But what are the things that will get published that will make your potential user read and think like, oh, this is cool, I want to try it out. So I started doing it with Duolingo, and importantly, like PR is often seen as like a vanity metric, like, oh, like great, we got press. We were very strict about PR, considering a PR only a success if it impacted DAUs, which was the metric we cared about. And so if you ask a PR agency, like you need to do PR and get me DAUs, they will say no. They'll say like, no, it's too hard. Like it's impossible to know what will happen. And in some ways they are right. But when you have someone and they're 27 in the company and all they have to do is get you DAUs, like they start thinking about how will PR get us DAUs and what's working and what's not working, you know? Is it the big publications? Is it the niche publications? Is it the story about the user? Is it the story about, like, I don't know, the science behind it or whatever? So when we started, we launched in Brazil. Here you can say January 1st, 2013. That's when I started working with them. They launched in Brazil, and you can start seeing the organic growth up until about June, because launch means like it became available in the App Store and people started like discovering it sort of naturally, right? So like Duolingo is already getting a little bit of traction, which is cool. I don't know if we did anything in May, to be honest. In July, we had the founder come to Brazil and give a talk at a conference called WWW. And it was a very whatever, like, I don't know, it doesn't even exist anymore. I don't know how important really it was at the time, but that gave me the excuse to reach out to press and say, the founder of Duolingo, which is a thing you've never heard of, has been invited to speak at this important conference, and would you like to have a conversation with them? And in some of these conferences, there's a lot of PR people there. And so like being able to get those interviews really helped us grow in awareness, and you can see the spike in DAUs. And even though it drops off, it still drops off significantly higher than where it was before. So it worked so well that we were like, let's do this again. So he came back to Brazil in October, and we did the second conference. It was called The Next Web, which I know is much more popular in Europe than it is in the US. And he gave a talk there, but it was the first one in Brazil, like no one really knew. But another great excuse to go and get journalists to talk about it. So we started, but I think with both of these, the other thing I did was, in addition to having these tech conferences, I would try to pair it up with another talk at another institution that was like a signifier for journalists to think this is important. So for example, if I said like, so-and-so was invited to speak at TechCrunch, like that's cool. But what if I said, this person was invited to fly over to the United States to speak at TechCrunch and Harvard? Like suddenly you have two things that make the journalist go like, oh, Harvard, TechCrunch, these people know what they're doing. They must know something about this that I don't. And therefore, this seems more important than I thought it was, so I will pay attention. And so figuring out how to do that in every country became part of our playbook. So the second screenshot is like, a year later, we started doing that in other markets. This was Turkey. Luis went and gave the commencement speech at the top university there, Boğaziçi University. So a lot of what we would do would pair university and conference, because Luis is a professor, and like we thought that like professors would understand the value of his work before anyone else, and they would be more likely to champion it to like the head of the school and say, we need to have this person speak. And so we started at the university. And in this case, he gave the commencement speech, which is incredible. But in most cases, like for example, in India, he went and spoke at a class at IIT Delhi, and it was just like spoke at a class. But I still included it in the pitch. Luis Bonan has been invited to India to speak at the blah, blah, blah conference. I think it was TechCrunch's first India thing, and to speak at IIT Delhi, even if it was just a class, you know, because it like gave it this weight. So it worked out super well. And then I can go into pitch tips as well, as if anyone wants to know about PR. I can get very tactical about like how to think about how to pitch people, but this is just an example of one of the pitches that we wrote. When it comes to social media, of course, it's important for growth, but it's important to highlight two things. One, it's a very long-term strategy. Like social media takes a long time to grow, especially when it's organic and real. Like you're building an audience that really cares about what you're saying. That's going to take time and effort. And I think it's worth the time and effort, but it needs to be one of those things like you put a little bit every week, you know, and you grow it consistently over time, because it's just going to take time. You can't expect results immediately. And the second thing I'll say is that from the social media standpoint, to same with the PR, how to get published is you need to think like a journalist thinks. Like, what does a journalist want to write about? What will their audience like? When you're doing social media, a lot of brands will say like, here's what we want to tell the world, you know, but like, that's not interesting. You have to think like, what do people want to see? What do people want to share? What will people like? What will people be motivated by? And that's the kind of content that is more likely to succeed. So here's examples of like how we used humor really early on. So this is something you could learn on Duolingo, and we would just like make fun of it. And then also this was a mission thing, because we believed in like an international world where immigration, you know, had a place in the world. This was right before the Trump election. So we knew that like a lot of people would be very fired up by this, but we didn't want to get political directly. But we knew that like it would really resonate with a lot of our audience, because our audience was people who believed in speaking other languages. So they were probably more likely to believe in some sort of immigration. So, but the point is, it's about the mission and it's about the humor. Those two things people are willing to share and talk about with their friends. Same thing with Latitude. So this is someone I'm talking to right after this, but Ernesto was a fellow at Latitude. And when we started Latitude, it was nothing. And we had to convince the top entrepreneurs of Latin America that this was like the new Y Combinator of Latin America, out of nowhere, thin air. So what we did is because we had like a network, we were able to invite some really great founders and said, hey, trust us, we're going to give you an amazing experience for 4 to 6 weeks. We're building something for you, and this is going to be really cool. And then we sent them this thing that we wrote that was designed for them to share on LinkedIn as a humble brag to having gotten into this very special program that very few people get into. That was like the right language that would make them want to share because they're proud, but also not feel like they're bragging, and would make their friends say, wait, what's Latitude? Why didn't I get in? I'm interested, because we knew that these founders would be connected to a lot of other top founders. And so that's how we started growing Latitude very quickly. And today it's been only 4 years, but it's quite well known in all of Latin America. The next piece is consideration. So when people discover you, then they have to consider that they actually want to try your thing out. This is an example from the Mike Bloomberg presidential campaign. I said I was doing these A/B tests. So this is about a landing page. A lot of people think about how to get someone to your website or to your app. You don't think about what happens when they get there. And so I spent a lot of my time at this campaign thinking about okay, what about step 2 and 3? How do we increase the number of people who land here and actually sign up? And there's some best practices that you can apply, like making sure that it's really mobile optimized, how color plays, emotion plays into it also. Always betting on the fact that people are lazy and not going to read text. So making sure that headlines match the button, because people are probably going to read the headline and the button. Things like that can really make an impact on how many people convert. SEO and landing page is also important from the point, same thinking, which is a lot of people focus on, I want to rank up on Google. And that helps with all the PR that we were doing, right? An important part of the PR was always getting the journalists to link back to Duolingo, which is hard, but possible. Once you rank, people click on it, then where do they land? And a lot of people were landing on pages like this. If they Googled learn Esperanto, they would find this page and they would land on this page. This is not a very enticing page that makes someone want to start learning. So we redesigned to make it very clear that you can learn something in 5 minutes for free, button up top. That kind of thing can really also impact how many people decide to give it a try. Because we're short on time, I won't go into detail about ASO, but we learned at the time that there were certain things that made a difference much more so than others in having people first find Duolingo when they search for learn Spanish or whatever, and then say, oh, okay, I will try this out. Retention is the holy grail. If you don't have retention, you probably don't have product market fit, and then you have to start building on that. This screen is just to show that everything at Duolingo was A/B tested from the moment that we had statistical significance on. So this was old Duo, and the screen that you had a game over, when you finished a lesson and it didn't work, showed this Duo, and we A/B tested the size of the puddles and the tears that Duo cried to see what would impact people starting again, and it actually had an impact. Onboarding, when you other psychology things, when you show people something like this, we thought, maybe people get really lazy because they see, oh, there's 5 different things and they kind of leave. What if we split it up into 3 steps and we get rid of anything we absolutely don't need? And this is important because for B2C especially, I think from the marketing perspective, you want all the information from the users possible because you want to give a really tailored experience. But that is not what the user wants at the time. And you need to focus on what the user wants, not on what you want in the beginning of that journey, and just get the very bare minimum to get them across that moment. So for example, we thought we needed to know that they wanted to learn Spanish, and we decided to remove it. We thought we needed to know their full name. We removed it. Username, also no, just email and password. That's it. Yeah, an email address, of course. The soft wall, this was a cool experiment where we realized we thought that people were more likely to sign up for Duolingo when they downloaded it because they were most excited about learning. They're like, I'm going to learn, and then you want to sign up. But it turns out that actually letting people do a little bit of Duolingo first and experience what it is, and then making them sign up was more effective. And so I can go into detail about how this experiment worked if anyone wants. One thing that we found is that even though it's very important to listen to your users, once you start scaling, some of your users are going to be very loud, and it doesn't mean that they are right. And this is very counterintuitive because most people say just listen to your users, right? And this is, again, when you're at scale, not when you're trying to find product market fit. So we redesigned the Duolingo website. We got a lot of really negative comments. My favorite one is, it looks like a circus wagon exploded on it. I grew up in a circus, I should know, which always made me very curious. And it turns out that if you look at the data, like the redesigned website did actually better than the old version. So this is like retention based on people who saw the new website versus the old one. So when you start growing, you're able to start relying more and more on metrics than on commentary in order to understand what works and doesn't. And you use your users' feedbacks as hypotheses for your A/B tests. We tested notifications a lot. Even though notifications, I think, are probably way harder now because there's just too much, it's still really important because that's where, like, most of the people who sign up for your product will get notifications at some point. And so it's like a very high leverage point in the experience that's worth testing. A learning that people always like is that we also found that sending people notifications 23.5 hours after they signed up was the most effective time to send them notifications, because that was the time in the day for them that was good for them to be on an app like Duolingo. So probably tomorrow it's going to be the same. So it doesn't matter if it's in the morning or at night or in the middle of the night or what time zone they're on. And we did 23.5 hours to make sure they got the notification and then had time to actually do the lesson at the time that we thought was going to be optimal for them. And the other thing about notifications is that it has to be useful to your user. It can't just be an advertisement, because that's going to get turned off immediately. So how do you actually make it part of the product experience? Like, getting the notification helps the user do whatever it is that they wanted to do when they downloaded your app or when they signed up for your service. So here, making people pick like what their goals are, also using like the streak mechanism, these things like helps people actually stick to their language learning goals. Yeah. And that's why they were open to the notifications.
Gina, one quick question. Sorry to interrupt the flow here, but how long did it take you to get to this very precise number, like 23.5 hours for notification?
Look, I think at this point we were probably like 3.5 years into Duolingo, if I had to guess. But like in terms of the experiment, maybe it was an experiment maybe it was like a 2-month thing where we were like, let's figure out what time, and you'd like try a couple of like 2-3 week cycles.
Thank you.
People loved hearing about badges. This is a really fun case because it was something that like I really resisted with my team because it took too much work and didn't seem to make an impact at first, but then ended up being the most impactful thing that we did. So I can talk about it another time. Also, thinking about your user. If you use Duolingo today, you see this, they're still doing this, which is there are things you want your user to do that the user doesn't want to do at a certain time. So we realized that our users were practicing Duolingo on the bus, on the train, like in public. And asking someone to speak into their phone in a foreign language in front of strangers is probably embarrassing. And so we run the risk of people saying, I'll just do this later, and close the app. And if they close the app, they forget to come back, they lose their streak, they're gone. So like finding ways to make sure that, oh, you can't speak now, that's okay. You can still complete your lesson and complete your goal. So things like that. This is about prioritization, which I already talked about, so I will skip. And this was like super, super fast.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. Look, 4 minutes before, we still have 4 minutes to go. This is perfect. Thank you so much. It's, really appreciate the level of details there that that you're sharing, especially on the technical side of things. Thank you so much for that. Guys, do you have any questions for Gina? One last question, perhaps. I have one that I want to ask you, but I want to give the audience first the chance to ask you a question. Don't be shy. Okay, Reese, there you go. Oh, Reese, do you want to unmute yourself? Reese is part of the Brighteye team. He's our head of research, Gina. So,
cool.
Hey, and hi everyone. Thank you for the awesome presentation. Super insightful and very specific, as David said. I am just intrigued as to which user groups you're thinking of focusing on in your new venture.
I'm going to be targeting high school students and college students, and basically helping people go through the college learning experience in a more fun and accessible way.
Super cool. Thank you for sharing.
Super nervous. Like I said, do not understand that generation. Have to hire young people who can help me not be cringe with my marketing at this point in time.
That's perfect. This is the perfect segue. Look, this is thank you so much, Chris. This is a great question and a perfect segue. So look, Gina, without obviously revealing too much on this new venture for high school and college students, what key lessons from both Duolingo or Tumblr, from Latitud, are you bringing with you there? Organic, still organic, organic all the way? Is it like, yeah, what is it that you're...
Yeah. So luckily, I think many, but I think, yeah, all of the organic, like we're definitely like, we're going to bet on organic. I don't even know how to do ads very well, to be honest. But we're going to be very organic focused and try to do it again. The thing about organic for me is that it's not like a recipe. I can't just like plug money in and see an output. You know, you have to come up with things and see if they work. So it gives me a little bit of like nerve-wracking feelings. But the second one is the mission, like the importance of having a real mission behind what you're doing and making sure that you're really great at communicating that and rallying people around it so that you can spread your message beyond just potential users so that you can get to those potential users.
Thank you, Gina. Yeah, well, Nicolo, yeah, well, she doesn't know yet. She'll figure something out. I think she'll be fine. Another question. What are the channels that one should focus on in 2024? Still PR?
I'm about to learn, Nicola, more so, but yes, PR, like people love asking me like, oh, you know, like PR used to work, but now it doesn't. I feel like a lot of, no offense to all the entrepreneurs here, but like I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and I get a lot of like, yeah, well, you did that in 2013 and now things are different. It's just not the case. Yes, some things are, but in general, no. In general, it's kind of all the same principles. Like, it doesn't matter if like, maybe like newspapers are no longer like being used because people are on our websites and then they're not on websites, they're going to be on VR, but they're still going to be getting the news somewhere. You know, there's still going to be information being published with mass amounts of people in some sort of way and like reaching large audiences because that is a business model. And that's how people get information. And so figuring out how to hack those will continue to, I think, always be relevant for humanity, no matter when you decide to launch something. So I still very much believe in PR. I think what has changed is that like now, like there's a lot more of an influencer and the micro influencer and the everyone is a media channel kind of approach to like what is media and like how to, you know, how to do that. Also, influencers are a lot more sophisticated in charging. So you need to be a lot more ingenious in convincing them not to charge. But even in 2013, like everyone wanted to charge for articles to be published. And we had to convince them that like, that's not how we worked and really stick to it. So PR is still a really big one. I think that like, of course, like we're going to have to explore like micro videos in some way because like that's what everyone consumes these days. And then when I find out the rest, I'll tell you, Nicolo, but I don't know.
That's good. Oh, last question. This is interesting. Raj, thank you so much for this one. Are you more like for the PR side of things? Are you more in-house or do you want to use, or do you want to outsource it and use an external agency?
In-house. Unless like, you absolutely can't, like you hate it, you don't have anyone who can communicate in your company, you're two engineers, you don't even know where to begin. Still though, I would hire like a freelancer, but like someone who's really dedicated to you and who's scrappy and cheap. Doesn't mean that PR agencies don't work. I worked with one PR agency I loved. They are in Hungary. And it really depends, but in general, PR agencies like they have a lot of clients to serve, and you're going to be one of their clients, and you're probably going to be not a very high paying client and not a priority for them. Yeah. And then Nicolo's question about geography, I can give a 5-minute answer. So for next time.
Nicolo, next time, add her on LinkedIn so you can follow her journey. It's yeah. Anyway, that's cool. Well, thank you so much, guys. We are at time now. Gina, massive thank you for your time, for sharing these great insights. I have a Notion page open here. It's filled with notes. So thank you so much. I'm very, very grateful for your time. Any last words that you want to share with the audience here? Last piece of advice or something? Or not? We just can't say bye.
Well, I'll say, guys, look, I know that this is really hard. I'm jumping in the trenches again, and building a startup is really hard. And building an edtech in particular is really, really hard. It's not where most of the money has been made historically. And there are very few examples of successes. So the truth is it's going to be really hard and the chances of you winning are low, but like you have to keep your chin up and give it your all. And then know that you tried and there's always like another opportunity if that didn't work. But that's just reality, you know? And I'm jumping into this new opportunity knowing that I have a 10% chance of success, which I think is high.
Well, but amen to that. It's Yeah, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. We will be following you and watching your you from afar. So thanks again, Gina. Thank you everyone for showing up and yeah, and keep. And I think I'll leave Hege do the outro because we have more sessions coming later.
Yes.
Thank you,
Thank
Gina.
you so much.
Yeah, just echo that. Thank you, Gina. Picked up a comment saying amazing. I also want to share one of David's DMs to me. Brilliant. I'm learning so much, as he just said. I think it sums it up for most of us. So thanks again. And I'm also very sure that you will do really well in your next venture.
Thank you so much.
On our side, it brings us to the end of day 2 of the festival, at least when it comes to sessions. We still have one more day with 2 sessions, one on funding and one on customer success tomorrow. It's still possible to sign up for them. But for now, thanks to everyone. Thanks for great questions. And again, thanks, Gina. Thanks, David. It's been a very insightful session. Thank you.
Speak soon. Bye, guys.